Few works have crossed the centuries with as much strength as the Iliad, attributed to Homer. Probably composed in the 8th century BC, it was born from a millenary tradition of oral poetry, preserved by the Aedes and Rhapsodes, who recited verses at festivals and banquets. These singers were not merely artists, but guardians of collective memory, transforming memories into song and identity. The Iliad does not narrate the entire Trojan War, but focuses on a few weeks of its 10th year, choosing as its axis the wrath of Achilles. This decision reveals the epic's focus, not the war itself, but the human drama unfolding behind the weapons and walls. For the ancient Greeks, the poem was more than entertainment. It was an ethical guide, teaching values such as courage, honor, and sacrifice, and showing the dangers of excessive pride, or hybris. At the same time, it preserved the memory of heroes and warriors, granting them existence beyond death. Even today, the Iliad offers us universal lessons about rage and loss, about glory and human fragility, and about how memory keeps the deeds and mistakes of the past alive. Before we dive into this canto that laid the foundation of Western literature, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who also appreciates deep reflections, and subscribe to the channel, supporting our work of bringing to light the great texts that have shaped human consciousness. The Iliad opens in a solemn and striking manner. Sing, O goddess, the wrath of Achilles, son of Peleus. In its very first lines, Homer announces the heart of his epic. It is not the Trojan War itself that will be recounted, but the wrath of a man, a personal emotion transformed into a cosmic force capable of altering the destiny of entire peoples. This literary gesture already reveals the greatness of the poem. Within it, the drama of humanity is born from the depths of a hero. We are in the 10th year of the war. The Achaeans, as the Greeks are called in the poem, have been besieging Troy for almost a decade. The command of the army is in the hands of Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, but the military structure is decentralized. Each contingent is led by a king or prince. Among them all, none is as feared as Achilles, son of the sea goddess Thetis and the mortal Peleus. More than a warrior, he embodies the boundary between the human and the divine, and his presence on the battlefield represents the hope of victory. The conflict between Agamemnon and Achilles arises from an apparently minor episode, yet one that carries the symbolic weight of pride. Agamemnon finds himself compelled to return his slave, Chryseis, daughter of a priest of Apollo, to appease the god's wrath as he was afflicting the Achaeans with a plague. Humiliated before his men, the king decides to assert his authority by taking Briseis, Achilles' captive, for himself. For a Greek, this act was not merely the loss of a woman, but a violation of time hos, the honor that upheld a warrior's identity. Wounded in his pride, Achilles withdraws from combat. More than that, he implores his mother, the goddess Thetis, to intercede with Zeus to favor the Trojans, until the Greeks come to understand the magnitude of the wrong done against him. This request inaugurates the central drama of the poem. Without Achilles, the Achaeans are left vulnerable. With him absent, the war becomes a field of resentments and trials. The wrath of Achilles is not merely a personal fury. It is a symbol of the fragility of human alliances, the cost of vanity, and the excess that endangers not only an army, but the legacy of an entire generation of heroes. With Achilles' withdrawal, the balance of the war is broken. The Achaeans, deprived of their greatest warrior, face a dramatic turning point on the battlefield. This void creates an opportunity for the Trojans, led by Hector, eldest son of King Priam, to gain the upper hand. Hector emerges as a counterpoint to Achilles. While Achilles is semi-divine and driven by the desire for personal glory, Hector is fully human in every sense. He does not fight merely for fame or pride, but for the defense of his homeland, his wife Andromache, and the young son who still waits for him in his mother's arms. Homer describes him as a brave warrior, but also as a man of tenderness and responsibility. It is precisely in this contrast that the richness of the poem lies. On one side, the hero's pursuit of immortal glory; on the other, the human burden of protecting his home. The battles that follow are described with astonishing richness of detail. Homer lists warriors, genealogies, feats, and deaths. Each fall is recounted with solemnity, as if no combatant could be forgotten. This practice serves a dual purpose: to immortalize the names of the heroes, and at the same time to remind us that war is not an abstraction, but a graveyard of individual lives. Each name preserved in the poem is an act against oblivion. Meanwhile, the gods do not remain neutral. Apollo and Aphrodite support the Trojans. Hera and Athena take the side of the Achaeans. Yet their actions reflect personal intrigues and rivalries, rather than universal justice. Olympus, mirrored on the battlefield, shows that even the gods are subject to passions and disputes, making human fate all the more unstable. The Trojan advance reaches the point of pushing the Greeks back to their ships. The Achaean army, once dominant, now finds itself on the brink of destruction. And it is in this scenario that the gravity of Achilles' absence is revealed. His withheld wrath is no longer merely a personal drama, but a threat to the survival of the entire Greek coalition. Homer's narrative shows how a single emotion, when taken to its extreme, can alter the course of entire peoples. Achilles' wrath makes room for Hector's glory, but also plants the seed of the tragedy to come. Faced with imminent danger, Agamemnon realizes his mistake. He gathers valuable gifts, lands, wealth, and even the promise to return Briseis, and sends an embassy to Achilles to persuade him to return to the fight. Odysseus himself, along with other warriors, delivers the proposal. The embassy scene is one of the most important in the Iliad, as it shows not only Achilles' obstinacy, but also the mindset of the time. Honor was the supreme value, and no wealth could make up for public dishonor. Achilles rejects all the gifts, declaring that he will no longer fight for the Achaeans and intends to return to his homeland. This radical refusal deepens the drama. The greatest Greek warrior not only withdraws, but also wants to see his comrades suffer so that they recognize his importance. It is in this context that Patroclus, Achilles' friend and inseparable companion, enters the scene. Moved by the tragedy that befalls the Achaeans, he asks the hero to let him fight in his place, wearing his armor. In this way, he could at least inspire the soldiers and repel the Trojans. Achilles agrees, but sets a limit. Patroclus should only defend the ships, without advancing to the walls of Troy. It is an order that, like so many in the epic, will be ignored by fate. Wearing Achilles' armor, Patroclus enters the battle and makes a great impact among the Trojans. They believe that the hero himself has returned to the war and retreat in panic. Reinvigorated, the Achaeans counterattack and manage to repel the immediate threat. But the heat of battle drives Patroclus beyond the agreed limit. Intoxicated by victory, he advances to the gates of Troy, ignoring Achilles' warning. At this point, fate takes its course. Apollo intervenes, striking him and weakening him, allowing Hector to confront him. The duel ends with Patroclus' death. Hector kills him and takes Achilles' armor as a trophy. The fall of Patroclus marks the most tragic moment of the Iliad. If until then Achilles' wrath was driven by wounded pride, it now turns into personal grief and a desire for revenge. The hero who had withdrawn from the war is forced to return, no longer to defend the Achaeans or his honor, but to avenge his friend's death. The narrative shows how, in a world ruled by war, even the closest bonds are swept along by fate. Patroclus, less renowned than Achilles, becomes the center of the epic, for it is his death that reignites the fire of the story. The news of Patroclus's death shatters Achilles from within. The hero who had until then stayed away from the war out of pride feels stripped of any reason to keep breathing. His grief is not only for his fallen friend, but for the deep, almost fraternal bond that united them. Patroclus was the balance to his fury, the presence that made him human amid the chaos of war. Without him, Achilles plunges into a darkness from which there is no return. Homer describes this morning in a grandiose manner. Achilles covers his head with ashes, throws himself to the ground, and cries out so painfully that his mother, the goddess Thetis, hears him from the depths of the sea. This gesture reveals something essential. Even though he is nearly divine, Achilles is pierced by utterly human pain. The war ceases to be a struggle for honor or territory and becomes an arena of personal revenge. Thetis, knowing that her son's fate is to die young, tries to console him, but there is no comfort. Achilles desires only one thing: to avenge Patroclus. The goddess then asks Hephaestus, the god of the forge, to craft a new set of armor. This armor, resplendent and indestructible, is not merely protection. It is the embodiment of Achilles' fury and glory. Homer devotes long verses to the description of his shield, which bears engravings of entire worlds, scenes of peace and war, labor and celebration, life and death. It is as if the entirety of human destiny were inscribed upon that object. When Achilles returns to the battlefield, the effect is devastating. His presence reignites the Achaeans' morale and terrifies the Trojans. It is not merely a warrior who enters the scene, but a force of nature. He cuts through ranks, pursues enemies, and kills without mercy. Homer describes him as fire-consuming dry fields, like a swollen river that sweeps everything in its path. This return, however, is not merely physical, it is a spiritual return. Achilles comes back no longer as a man, but as an instrument of death. If before his absence was marked by wounded pride, now his presence is defined by the certainty that nothing else matters, not even his own life. He knows that avenging Patroclus will cost him his fate, but the choice is already made. The battlefield is ablaze with fury. After devastating the Trojans, Achilles moves toward the destiny that was already set to face Hector. The Prince of Troy, who until then had carried his people's hope, now finds himself facing the overwhelming force of the greatest Greek warrior. The encounter between the two is not merely a battle, it is a clash between two worldviews. Hector is the hero of responsibility, the one who fights not for himself, but for his city, his wife Andromache, his young son, and his entire people. He embodies human measure, courage in the face of the inevitable. Achilles, on the other hand, is the hero of excess, of absolute fury, of a brilliance that consumes everything around him, even if the price is his own life. Before the duel, Homer shows us a hesitant Hector. He knows he faces an invincible enemy. For a moment, he thinks of negotiating, of proposing a pact of honor. But soon, reality asserts itself. There is no possible reconciliation with Achilles, consumed by a wrath that knows no bounds. Hector then decides to face his destiny head-on. The combat is brief but intense. Hector tries to resist, but Achilles is relentless. Driven by fury and the desire for revenge, the Greek delivers the fatal blow. Hector's death is not merely the fall of a warrior, but the collapse of Troy's heart. He who upheld the city's hope now lies lifeless before its walls. And yet, Achilles' violence does not end with victory. Driven by hatred, he ties Hector's body to his chariot and drags it around the walls, before the desperate eyes of Priam, Hecuba, and Andromache. It is a gesture that breaks the limits of the Greek code of honor, an act that dehumanizes not only the enemy, but also the victor himself. At this moment, Homer shows both the peak and the downfall of Achilles. He achieves his revenge, but loses all measure, crossing the point where glory turns into shadow. The duel between Achilles and Hector is not merely the climax of the Iliad, it is a revelation of how wrath, even justified by grief, can corrode humanity. After the duel, Achilles' fury finds no rest. For days he continues to drag Hector's body around Patroclus's tomb, as if the act could quell his grief. But nothing is enough. Victory does not soothe the emptiness left by the lost friend. It is at this point that the Iliad takes a turn. From the brutality of revenge, we move toward the possibility of compassion. It is Priam, the aged king of Troy, who takes the initiative. Guided by Hermes, disguised as a guide, he crosses the enemy camp alone until he reaches Achilles' tent. It is a scene of rare intensity. The elderly, vulnerable father approaches the one who killed his son. Crossing this hostile space is, in itself, an act of courage greater than any duel. When he finally meets Achilles, Priam kneels and, in a gesture of supreme humility, kisses the hands that took Hector's life. His words ask for no glory, no justice. They ask only for the right to bury his son. He appeals to the memory of Peleus, Achilles' father, reminding him that he too grows old while awaiting the return of his distant son. Upon hearing this, Achilles' grief finds a mirror. For the first time, he sees himself not only as a hero, but as a son. Homer describes what happens next with rare delicacy. The two enemies weep together. Achilles cries for Patroclus and for the mortal fate that awaits him. Priam cries for Hector and for the impending ruin of his city. In that moment, war dissolves into humanity. The enemy ceases to be a monster and becomes a man once more. Achilles returns Hector's body, grants a truce for the funerals, and allows Troy to live its final days with dignity. It is a moment of pause, almost of reconciliation, that concludes the Iliad. Not with the fall of Troy, but with the funeral rites of its greatest hero. The retrieval of Hector's body reveals the essence of the epic. Behind glory, wrath, and blood, the human bond that unites even enemies endures. And it is in this recognition of the other's grief that war, for a moment, finds a breath of humanity. The Iliad goes far beyond a mere war narrative. Homer shows us the human drama behind glory and destruction, exploring wrath, pride, loss, and compassion. The poem reveals that true greatness lies not only in strength or courage, but in the ability to recognize humanity, even in one's enemy. The epic teaches us how the ancient Greeks valued honor and memory. Every gesture, every choice, carried the weight of being remembered. Homer names each warrior, preserving their stories and ensuring their lives are not lost to time. It is a reminder that even amid violence, acknowledging each individual's existence holds value. At the same time, the Iliad does not hide the cost of war. Andromache's grief, Priam's mourning, and Patroclus's loss show that every glory is accompanied by suffering. Achilles' return of Hector's body concludes the poem with a gesture of compassion, reminding us that even in moments of destruction, empathy and respect for life remain fundamental. Thus, the Iliad transcends time. It is not merely the story of the Trojan War, but a mirror of the human condition between violence and solidarity, between pride and fragility. The work invites us to reflect on our own limits, our choices, and the importance of recognizing humanity in everyone around us. Now tell me in the comments, were you already familiar with the Iliad? Which passage moved you the most? If this video stirred something in you, like it and share it with someone who, like you, also enjoys deep reflections. If you want to continue this journey with us, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Every video here is an invitation to a new perspective on yourself and on life. If you want to keep exploring, I've selected 2 videos appearing on the screen that can help you. Pick one and meet me there. See you in the next video. Bye.